Media, welcome to the press conference following the meeting of the Finnish and Latvian president. We'll start with the statement from our host, President of the Republic of Latvia, Mr. Edgars Rinkevics. Good afternoon, dear members of the media. We indeed just concluded a delegation meeting between Latvia and Finland. I met with my Finnish counterpart, Mr. Stubb. It is my pleasure and my honor to welcome the President of Finland, the First Lady of Finland, on their visit to Latvia. I should say that for me personally, this is a historic visit, in fact, because this is the first incoming state visit for me as the president, and I'm happy that it is the Finnish president who coincidentally is paying the first state visit. Finland is our close friend and ally. Our political, economic, cultural, and I should say also sporting ties are very, very close and very dynamic, and we not only discussed very important security challenges and vital economic cooperation issues, but we also looked back at the Eurobasket competition in Riga. We both went to the Finnish-Greek game, and I can only repeat that the whole Latvia was holding its breath for the Finnish team during the game, and we were very happy to see the fighting spirit that the Finnish squad demonstrated during the competition, during the tournament here in Riga. But undoubtedly, of course, during the meeting we discussed at great length security in the region, security of Ukraine. We also talked about the security of the Baltic Sea region, broader Baltic Sea region, and I should say that President Stubb and I, we highly appreciate the cooperation that we have developed with Finland when it comes to military cooperation since 2023, when Finland acceded to NATO, for example. It has already resulted in some practical activities as well. The security of the Baltic Sea region and Baltic Sentry, which was launched after several incidents with underwater cables, with underwater infrastructure, and Baltic Sentry has proven to be very efficient. I mean, this cooperation when it comes to securing the Baltic Sea. We also discussed the incursion of drones in the Polish airspace as well, and I would like to also specifically underline that NATO has made several steps to create a similar to the Baltic Sentry mission, which is called the Eastern Sentry, and further protection or the security of the eastern flank airspace would require transformation of the Baltic Air Policing mission into Baltic Airspace Defense mission. Not only policing mission. So when it comes to defense cooperation, it's not only focused or built around NATO. We also share defense industry. Patria, for example, which is located in Valmiera, is a good example of close military industrial cooperation with Finland. Tomorrow we'll visit the National Armed Force Training Camp in Liepāja to discuss bilateral and multilateral military cooperation in scope of the Liepāja training camp base. And last but not least, we discussed at great length the strengthening of the defense capabilities following the decisions taken in the summit in Hague. 5% of GDP on defense spending is a good target, but you don't really sort of use a percentage as a weapon. You need weapons, physical weapons, and this is the area in which we need to develop quite significantly. This year we'll reach 4% of GDP on defense spending. In terms of defense spending, we have a clear path for the progress towards 5% of the GDP, but there are a lot of challenges to overcome on the way towards 5%. We talked about support to Ukraine as well. We discussed political support. We discussed practical support to Ukraine. For example, this year, 42 Patria armored vehicles will be handed over to the armed forces of Ukraine this year. And we also talked about drone coalition, international drone coalition for Ukraine. And on behalf of Latvia, I promised to join the Finnish-led civilian shelter coalition. because it is not only an additional support to Ukraine, but it is also vital for us to be aware of what our civilian protection infrastructure comprises today and how it needs to be developed in future. We'll learn both from Finland and Ukraine on how to build those shelters, and we will work very closely with Ukraine and Finland in this area. So this is a cooperation which will go both ways. Will not only help the others, but will also receive a lot of assistance and a lot of advice from the others. We also talked about further cooperation in defense and military industry when it comes to air defense systems, anti-drone systems. We talked about economic cooperation in the field of education and culture. Let me leave some of the topics for later conversations and meetings as well, so I won't mention everything that we discussed, but I would like to reiterate that our cooperation on the bilateral level and Nordic-Baltic level, which in fact in recent years has developed as a good format, as a good framework for enhancing political security and economic cooperation, and our cooperation within the European Union and NATO is excellent when it comes to Finland. So usually state visits like these are much more focused on practical issues, on real decisions, and also the symbolic highest level commitment to the friendship and cooperation between countries on all levels in all the possible ways, and also through different ceremonies, which shows that we are close friends. So, Alex, it's over to you. In fact, I do suppose that media are expecting to hear from the Finnish president, my Finnish counterpart, although what I would like to underline, Mr. Stubb is currently very active, playing an active role internationally, supporting Ukraine, working with the American, Ukrainian, and European allies, and these are the efforts that Mr. Stubb will be fully supported by Latvia. So it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edgars, and thank you for the hospitality that you and your team have showed us here on our first state visit to Riga. You will all know that Edgars and I go a long way back. We pretty much have a similar background in having been focused on foreign policy for most of my life. I managed to be foreign minister only for 3 years, unlike Edgars, who was there for 12 years, but we've pretty much known each other for the past 14, 15 years and have kept up contact in so many different ways. And I was also very happy and thankful to host Edgars at the Kultaranta talks at my summer residence this summer, where we had a good conversation together with Estonian President Alexander about world affairs. Now, the Baltic Sea has brought Finland and Latvia together for a long time, and we can go all the way back to the Viking Age. But the truth is that what binds us is very much values and interests, not only after the end of the Cold War inside the European Union, but now in the strongest military alliance in the world in the form of NATO. Our common history is one of cooperation on security. And I think that this state visit shows our appreciation for cooperation with Latvia, bilaterally of course, but also in multilateral fora, including what Edgars just mentioned in the form of NB8. I think this sort of combination of Nordic and Baltic states, which is values-based and interest-based, will strengthen in the coming years. It is strong already now, and when you start including Poland and Germany in it, you see a very strong values-based security entity up here in northeastern Europe. There's only so much a small country like Finland or Latvia can do alone, but we can do a lot together. Together we can deter and defend against the threats, both military and non-military, which we see coming from Russia. The President and I had a good conversation about not only the security situation in our region, but also Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, a conversation also about the change in world politics, and we even touched issues linked to the Middle East, not least Israel and Palestine. But as we all know, Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine is our war. Russia's escalation of its war in Ukraine to include incursions of European airspace is simply unacceptable and calls for a clear response. That's why I welcome the actions undertaken by NATO in the form of Eastern Sentry. And of course, if you look at what happened in the margins of Finnish territorial waters at the end of December last year, NATO was able to create an immediate response in the form of the Baltic Sentry. And NATO has now done the same thing with Eastern Sentry in making sure that similar incursions don't happen on the eastern flank by setting up strong air defenses. The stability of the Baltic Sea is of fundamental importance, and Finland and Latvia have, of course, separately and jointly made efforts to strengthen the security in our region and all of Europe. Both Latvia and Finland have kept investing in security and defense. We need to send a strong message that all of Europe takes its defense and security seriously. The threat from Putin's Russia will not diminish even when Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine ends. As Edgars mentioned, our countries have strong defense material and defense industry cooperation that can be further deepened. The CAVS program of Patria was mentioned as a good example, and again we see the spillover effect with over 40 Latvian paid Patria vehicles going over to Ukraine, and I'm sure that we'll work on other similar projects. In many ways, I would argue finally that Finland and Latvia are leading the way, building Europe to be a coherent and capable geopolitical actor. The bonds of Finland and Latvia have forged in the decades will ensure that together we're prepared for whatever lies ahead. And I just want to finish by the fact that we right now live in very uncertain times, and we have to, as societies, have the capacity to deal with uncertainty. There are things coming at us day in and day out which we're not used to, certainly not since the end of the Cold War. And I think resilience is the key, and our capacity to act to the unknown together. And I think in the past few years we've shown that it works. I think one of the first people that I always reach out to if something happens is in Finland is the President of Latvia, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that in the future as well. Thank you very much. Paldies.
Thank you. Now we'll open the floor for questions. Gatis Suhavets, please.
Latvia question for President Stubb. You have developed a close relationship with President Trump. If you have discussed regional security, may I ask what is your impression about President Trump's commitment to defend the Baltic states from possible Russian aggression? Thank you.
I think the United States is very committed to security in northeastern Europe. We have seen President Trump on numerous occasions pushing all of us to increase our defense expenditure from 2% to 5%. A country like Finland has a defense cooperation agreement with the United States. We are a new ally. And I think the American administration sees the Nordic states and Baltic states as an entity for its own security posture. for all that I hear and see in the conversations with our American friends in NATO and elsewhere, is that European security is of utmost importance for the current US administration.
Paldies, thank you. Ms.
Hello, Annina Karpala from the Finnish News Agency. My question is for both presidents. Do you think the airspace violations by the Russian drones will continue, and what kind of threat do they pose for EU and NATO countries, Finland and Latvia specifically? Also, do you see a connection between the airspace violations and the ongoing Zapad military exercise?
Well, I think what we have seen since the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine, and especially in the last 2 or so years, that there have been violations of Romanian airspace, Polish airspace, Lithuanian airspace, and also Latvian airspace. We had an accident a year ago that most probably was a drone that veered off the course, flew over the Belarus and crashed in Latvia. What happened last week is something that I would say, for me, is very difficult to believe was accidental. If you have 19 plus drones flying into Poland, then, as we discussed actually with President, there can be a couple of explanations: intentional, incompetence, or both. And all of three options are scary, frankly. So from that point of view, I do believe, and I here agree with Alex, that the decision by NATO to put Eastern Sentry, the decision of NATO to increase air defense capabilities of the eastern flank is appropriate and right response. However, what we need to learn from this situation is that, and at this point, anti-drone defense systems in NATO countries still need to be developed. Normally, you don't use very expensive air defense missiles to shoot down rather cheap drones. That's where probably lesson number one should be drawn. Number two, whether that's connected with Zapad exercise. Well, what we see about Zapad exercise that formally ends today, if I'm not mistaken, is that it's not as large-scale exercise as some people were expecting, probably because of ongoing military operations by the Russian troops in Ukraine, and Ukraine is to some extent saving us again from more Russian troop presence in Belarus or near our borders. I wouldn't speculate currently whether that incursion was related with Zapad or not, but I would take this seriously, and I think that NATO takes that seriously. We had Article 4 consultations last week. Some decisions are made, but we can't rule out, and that is something that I've said also last week, that such kind of accidents may repeat. The best response would be prepare. I think it was very good response by the Polish Air Force to shoot them down, to show that we take all the measures appropriate, but we have certain lessons to be drawn.
Yeah, I come back to the point that we have to expect the unexpected, and that means that Russia is going to continue to test the West in one form or another. And as Edgars mentioned, there are three possibilities in these kinds of cases. One is malintent, the second one is incompetence, and the worst one is a combination of malintent and incompetence. And then we just have to ask ourselves, what do we do? Well, in the case of undersea cables, we established a deterrence in the form of the Baltic Sentry, and it seems to have worked, at least so far. And in terms of the drones flying into Polish airspace, over 19 of them over the span of 7 hours, as President Rinkevics noted, it is very unlikely that that was a mistake. We established first Article 4 consultation procedures, which I think was the 8th time in the history of the alliance that this took place. And then secondly, secure, and the Secretary General of NATO decided to establish a Baltic sentry. And in many ways, we live in volatile times, and it's important that the alliance understands the new dynamics of modern warfare. The line between war and peace has been blurred, and we'll end up seeing these types of tests in the future. We're very happy that the Eastern Sentry now begins in Polish airspace. We take lessons learned from there and then expand it all the way up to the high north, finding, as was noted, a good balance between the types of air defense that we use for the types of threats that might exist. I don't want to speculate whether this particular drone incident was linked to Zapad or not. We have been observing the Zapad exercise coming from Belarus and Russia, and we see no major abnormalities in that military exercise so far.
Thank you. And Mr. Rutinen, please, the floor is yours. Mr. Rutinen.
Jyri Huttunen, Ilta-Sanomat. The President Trump said on weekend that new tougher American sanctions require all the NATO countries to stop buying Russian oil, and he required also tariffs on China. As the sanctions have been postponed continuously, do you consider this sign of new sanctions, or is this a new way to postpone sanctions once again?
Well, President Trump had a phone conversation with European leaders a week and a half ago on Thursday in Paris. It was a very fruitful conversation, and the two elements that he put forward, the first one was linked to some European countries buying oil and gas, and I fully agree with him that that should stop, and it should stop immediately. And of course there are two countries in particular inside the European Union that we refer to in this case, and they are Slovakia and Hungary. As far as sanctions and tariffs are concerned, I have never seen the European Union more united or more effective in rolling out numerous sanctions packages. The latest one is the 19th sanction package, which the European Commission and its member states are working on right now. So we continue to work on gaining the economic cost or increasing the economic cost of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. And as I have said before, there are many things that China could do in making sure that Russia would not be capable to continue its war. And in that sense, I believe that President Trump and the US administration is on the right side.
Just very quickly to add, I very much agree that we must stop buying Russian oil and gas. This country, some 10 years ago, was 100% dependent on Russian oil and gas. And we made a decision when the full-scale aggression started to stop buying those resources. We survived, and I think that everyone in Europe can do that, and that would be appropriate decision made. When it comes to other sanctions, I think that what we in the European Union are lacking is the secondary sanction mechanism. Because one thing is that we stop buying something from Russia or selling to Russia, we put sanctions on, but then at the end of the day, there are a lot of examples of circumventing those sanctions, and the European sanction mechanism, while I very much applaud all the 18 packages, and probably very soon we are going to see the 19th sanction package are being put on, we still have a lot of ways how those sanctions are circumvented. And in that case, establishment of such kind of secondary sanction mechanism would be probably very efficient. When it comes to the proposal from President Trump that NATO allies stop buying Russian oil and gas, I think that this is the right approach. When it comes to the tariffs, I think that this is also the issue that probably needs to be discussed between European, American leaders, and to find ways how we can actually advance in making such kind of policies more efficient.
I could perhaps just add one thing, that I think the issue of frozen assets is key here. The 300 billion euros that have been frozen, and I think with the right measures of burden sharing in Europe, those should be released in one way or another to benefit Ukraine, whether it's reconstruction or other things at the moment. So there are many ways in which to put increased economic pressure on Russia, and using the frozen assets would be one.
And that is where our positions are very, very aligned. I think we are like-minded on this issue completely.
Paldies, ar to mums laiks ir
Thank you. This concludes our press conference. Thank you all.